Hi, I'm Shana Lipner-Grover from Sage Country Herbs, and we're here in San Diego at Balboa Park's Trees for Health Garden, and we're going to go visit some of our plant friends. Today, I'd like to introduce you to this incredibly well-known, historically important tree, and that is the olive, Olea europaea. This tree is part of the Oleaceae family. It's the namesake of its own family. This is a subtropical tree. They tend to be pretty small trees, ranging from 10 to 40 feet tall. And the history of this tree is so vast. Olive trees are evergreen, which means they don't drop all of their leaves at once. And their leaves also tend to be opposite each other on the stem. They tend to have a really dark, rich green, forest green color on the top, and quite smooth, a leathery texture. And then, like many leaves in the plant world, the underside is white. And that white or silvery color comes from many, many hairs that are crisscrossed. And so it literally covers up that green color. Now, the wood of these trees are really resistant to rot, which is a really good thing in terms of their longevity. These trees have been cultivated for at least 7,000 years. This is a very old tree. Fossil records have shown that members of the olive family have been around for 20 to 40 million years on this earth. There is so much vast history. Now, as I said, the wood tends to be really good at resisting rot, which means that oftentimes if this tree is damaged on its canopy, the root will come back. It will allow sprouts to come. It protects itself so that it can keep coming back even when it is damaged. And that's a really beautiful thing for its own longevity. Now, it blooms in the springtime. And one of the really interesting things about the botany of this tree is that there's two different types of flowers on the same tree. One of the flowers is bisexual. That means it has both male and female reproductive organs, a pistil and stamen. That's the one that will produce the fruit, of course, the olive, because that comes from the fertilized ovary. The other flower is a unisexual flower that only has the male stamen. And that's important because this tree is also wind pollinated, which means that the male flowers release their pollen and then rely on the wind to blow that pollen around until it lands on the bisexual flowers that then can be pollinated, which can then turn into, of course, the olive fruit that we all know, and that can be pressed for the oil that many people love. One of the really cool plant intelligence about this tree is that it will choose when it wants to flower and go to fruit based on the resources it has access to. So if it's a drought year, or maybe there was some intense damage like wildfire in the area, this tree will choose to not bear fruit and not even put on flowers so that it can reserve those resources. There are some areas where olive trees will only go to flower and fruit every other year, reserving the resources of that in-between year. Now, when it does go to fruit, the fruit botanically is called a drupe. Drupes are really common. Think of cherries or peaches or apricots. Drupes are a hard stone in the middle covered with flesh. So a stone is a hard coating that can hold the seeds. And in the case of the olive, a stone holds 1 to 2 seeds in each one. Now, of course, olives are a very common fruit to be eaten. I say fruit because botanically, that's what it's considered. It is a swollen ovary. But the fruit actually has been cultivated way more for its oil content, because one of the ways that olives really shine is that the fruit consists of 20 to 30% oil. This is really, really important when you think of historically getting access to oil and fat, which is vitally important to things like our brain and our skin and our eyes and a lot of other reasons. We need fat in our diet. And where you get historically, the most fat would be from, of course, animals. Now, of course, we can get oils from things like nuts, but the percentage of oil in nuts is dramatically less than the olive. Pressing of olives gives you way more oil, and that really paves the way for the historical use of olive oil because it is so incredibly vast. Now, the fresh fruits of olives are not generally eaten. They are rich in a glycoside that makes it really bitter, so it's really not enjoyable and might even give a stomach ache. But the processing, mostly it's just soaking in either a salt solution or an alkali solution like lye in water. And that will, over time, usually around 6 months, but could be longer, will help to neutralize that glycoside, rendering the fruit less bitter and more enjoyable to eat. Also rendering the oil less bitter as well. Now, olive trees generally start putting out fruit in the 4 to 8 year time period, but their real big, heavy production years are in the 15 to 20 years old. So olive oil has been cultivated for so many years from the olive tree that, of course, there's many different classifications. Of course, the most common one is just your general olive oil, and that has to do with the pressings. Definitely, I would say the more recognized as a classification would be extra virgin olive oil, which means it comes from the very first pressing. And that's important to know because that means that it has a lot more of the nutrition that is found within the oil, especially oil-soluble vitamins like vitamin E. Vitamin E is a wonderful antioxidant, really plays a big role in a lot of the nutritional value of the olive and the olive oil. But also keep in mind, with things like extra virgin olive oil, you are just wasting it if you are cooking with it. Extra virgin olive oil really has been considered sacred, not only in medicine, in ceremony, in ritual. This oil was the first oil that was representing the eternal flame of the first Olympic Games in Greece. Now, we're really talking about some awesome history there. Beyond that, this oil was very commonly used for cleansing the skin. It's been used for a wide variety of gifts during ceremonies, during weddings, for births. It's very common historically, especially around the Mediterranean, to gift some olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is part of the triad of Mediterranean diet. This idea of eating local, eating fresh, eating a little bit of extra virgin olive oil and a little bit of wine and enjoying your meal, breaking bread with family and community. Of course, beyond the oil being used to burn as an eternal flame, the winners of all of those games were crowned with a crown made of olive leaves. And of course, an olive branch has been a representative symbol of peace and tranquility for a long, long time. It's interesting when people actually use the idea of the symbol of the olive branch and don't actually even understand the history of why we use the symbol of the olive branch to represent peace between nations. Over the years, olive oil has represented things like wisdom, purity, fertility, why it's been a gift at births. So many historical reasons why people use olive and olive oil, a lot of it being that we get so much from the pressing. The history of olive oil is so vast. It's written about in the 3 most well-read religious texts: the Torah, the Bible, Old and New Testaments, as well as the Quran. So 7,000 years is a long time for people to experiment with different things to be able to figure out what works. So, of course, something like olive oil for a wide variety of health claims. Lots of different things have been tried. Olive oil has been shown, both historically and scientifically, has been shown beneficial for things like cardiovascular disease. A lot of this has to do with the fact that it is rich in polyunsaturated fats called omega oils. This has shown benefit in things like elevated blood pressure, elevated cholesterol and triglycerides. It's also shown beneficial at lowering blood sugar. Now, this is something to be aware of because if somebody is a type 2 diabetic and is already on pharmaceutical drugs to help lower their blood sugar, you want to be aware of that when using olive oil on a regular basis. It's so well documented that it affects not only pressure, but also blood sugar, that it is recommended that you reduce your consumption of olive oil in the 2 weeks before surgery, because you want to make sure that you're not going to throw any of those levels off during surgery. Of course, anything that is helpful for the cardiovascular system and cholesterol is also going to be helpful for potentially heart issues. It's been useful historically for things like diabetes, a wide variety of inflammations from arthritis to painful infections, things like ear infection, sinus infection, urinary tract infection. Olive oil has been used to help soften earwax, to help coat and soothe the ear. It's also been used internally for things like stomach ailments, gas pains, and interestingly enough, it's useful for both diarrhea and the opposite of constipation. With constipation, of course, it is a lubricant and going to help facilitate a bowel movement. Now, our brains also are made of fat. So when we are taking in good quality fats, we're giving good raw material to our brains. So olive oil has been used historically for things like memory and cognition. It's been helpful for vision issues, vision acuity, lots of other infections as well. Internally, you also hear about olive oil being used for things like gallstones and gallbladder spasms. Some types of migraines and some types of headaches will respond to olive oil. Even some types of cancer have been clinically studied in the effects of olive oil. We're not talking about a curative here. We're talking about a substance that is helping our bodies find balance when we're dealing with diseases that throw us off balance. So olive oil historically, as well as currently, has been used for so many things, because I'm not even done. There's still more. We're still talking about the oil itself. Externally, olive oil has been used for all kinds of things, from dealing with head lice to helping heal wounds, keeping the area hydrated, burns, keeping it hydrated and cooling, providing a moist environment for that healing to happen. So many different things have been tried and have been successful as well. Personally, I've used extra virgin olive oil in things like topical liniments and massage oils, and found it helpful for people dealing with some skin issues like psoriasis or eczema, or even stretch marks before and after giving birth. So many things that we can do with it. Of course, it's also been used for things like making candles and a wide variety of industrial uses as well. So beyond the fruit and the oil itself, we can talk about the leaf. The leaf of olive is actually a wonderful antiviral, antibacterial, antimicrobial, and general antiseptic. It's been used for so many different things like sinus infections, ringworm, jock itch, even helpful in things like yeast infections or vaginitis. After everything we've already gone over, I'm still only scratching the surface. People have also worked with olive leaf for things like herpes and shingles, colds and flus, tooth infections. Just so many different things that have been tried, especially with something so heavily steeped in history. Olive trees are incredibly common here in San Diego, and you can come on down to the Trees for Health and get to know olive tree for yourself.